Globalization is the process by which businesses or other organizations develop international influence or start operating on an international scale. I'm a grade 10 student at Chinook who recently attended a social studies class that questioned to what extent should we embrace globalization. Through various class instruction and reading, I found that globalization is a complex force. In Social Studies 10, I learned the progress of globalization, the importance of critical thinking, how globalization has changed the quality of life for humans, as well as how it shaped my own views. In my journey, I decided to ask myself 5 questions. Number 1. Can I reflect on the themes and big ideas and events that occurred during the era of historical globalization? I must compare those themes to the big ideas and events of the current era of economic globalization. Some believe globalization grew from 3 phases. The first phase involved goods and ideas being exchanged along ancient trade routes. The second phase was the building of new ideas. Particularly, Europeans developed technologies that enabled them to sail much farther than ever before. European imperialism is a term that refers to one country's domination over another country's economic, political, and cultural institutions. The third phase is the one the world is in now. It is a time of rapid growth of the world markets and instant communication. Historians refer to the second phase as historical globalization. Europeans are very ethnocentric. They believe that the only valid worldview is their own, and they judge other people according to their own beliefs, customs, and traditions. Sadly, many First Nations people suffered during this time and were treated horrible. During Canada's colonizations, Europeans treated them like lesser humans. The government put in residential schools and passed laws like the Indian Act in 1867, which eliminated religious practices like the potlatch and Sundance. Europeans were also guilty of using the triangle trade to their advantage. They took raw materials from the Americas to Europe, sent manufactured goods to Africa, and then sent slaves back to the Americas. Economic globalization refers to the increasing interdependence of world economies as a result of the growing scale of cross-border trade of commodities and services, as well as the rapid spread of technologies. This can be viewed in the third phase. In 1914, European empires controlled great wealth, vast territories, and lives of millions of people. The imperialist trade arrangements with one another and with their colonies were complex and interdependent and led to the massive increase in the production of goods. This event certainly improved the standard of living for some countries and their citizens, but not everyone. Personal and collective identities, as well as economic and political systems, were destroyed. Many First Nations people suffered from poverty and oppression. They were forced to abandon their traditional ways of life. The wealth produced by colonies benefited rich people and rulers in the home country. Many people believe that this inequality laid the foundation for the inequalities that continue to exist in today's global economy. I hope that moving forward, the world looks into their past and recognizes mistakes during the process of globalization. Canada has attempted to take responsibilities for their role with the First Nations. The government passed Bill C-31 and the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples in an attempt to take responsibility for their mistakes. Canadians must recognize how poorly First Nations people were treated and try to make a reconciliation. We can't stop globalization, but we can certainly learn from our past mistakes. Unfortunately, we continue to exploit other countries to advance our own intentions. Capitalism seems to dominate the world economy. Today, most bananas sold in North America are imported from developing countries in Central and South America. Ecuadorian bananas are cheap for Canadians because workers are paid very little and work in poor conditions. Most families must put their children to work in banana fields and force them to work long days. Government, corporations, and individuals need to make greater efforts to prevent tragedies from the past from repeating themselves. Number 2, what did I learn about myself as I studied globalization? Prior to taking Social Studies 10, I had a pretty close-minded way of thinking and didn't understand globalization and how it affected the world. I didn't realize the role that people, governments, and organizations played on the international scale. Globalization has changed individual and collective identities. I have learned about the effect of Canadian industries on the third world countries. For example, Nike's influence on Bangladesh. Nike relied on sweatshops in Bangladesh to export large volumes of merchandise for very little pay. Kids were often forced to work in factories instead of attending schools. Social Studies 10 has really opened up my eyes to how others live around the world and taught me to think about how my choices can affect others. By choosing to buy certain items, name brand shoes or clothing, big organizations can exploit countries and their laborers. Now that I'm aware of these things, I will try to become a better global citizen by advocating for people in those countries, by writing letters to my government, reminding them of everyone's human rights, attending peaceful protests, and not supporting the brands that exploit poor countries. Thankfully, Canada and the US have many privileges, including freedom of speech, which gives us the opportunity to voice concerns for people who are being treated poorly. Together, we can help make the world safe for everyone. Number 3. Why do I think critical thinking is increasingly a more important aspect of citizenship in our globalized world today? I feel people in the world are often wrapped up in superficial things and only try to better themselves. Corporations don't care about individual people, but I feel they are motivated by how much money they can gross. Unfortunately, governments can fall victim to this as well. They are constantly trying to become a powerhouse within the first world countries. Often people act without thinking about how their actions will affect others. Fortunately, knowledge is power. Canadians need to think critically and question the government and its organizations within. Thinking critically means investigating the intentions of others and weighing if the harm that can result is bigger than what can be gained, as well as if the actions are morally acceptable. Governments and industries must be held accountable. An example of people thinking critically and holding organizations accountable is in 2011. A protest in China broke out accusing Apple of exploiting Chinese workers. This forced Apple to face public scrutiny around the world. If everyone learns to think critically, we can change the way the world functions and create a place that is safe and healthy for all people. Number 4. To what extent has globalization served to improve the quality of life of all humans? Although globalization can be viewed negatively on different scales, it is also important to recognize it has improved lives in a number of different ways. Firstly, corporations have crossed borders and created jobs in different countries. Many people in Yemen and Vietnam found employment through businesses like H&M and Zara. This gave them a source of income to support their families. Secondly, it has increased the ability for people to feel connected all over the world. Countries who have experienced natural or man-made disasters have received help immediately due to our instant communication technology. Caring individuals can send food and clothing within days. The spread of news encourages doctors, nurses, and vets to travel to war-torn countries hoping to help ease suffering. Technology has also allowed traveling around the world to be easy, safe, and fast. Lastly, globalization gives people and countries the opportunity to share technology around the world. Scientists can share new discoveries with one another and work together to advance their research. Number 5. From what have I learned? What advice would you give yourself to strengthen your learning in your next social studies course? Social studies has always been my favorite class, and over this year I have learned about globalization as well as how I learn. I'm a linear thinker, and I like putting things in order. Social studies is like a story with a timeline and events. I like the fact everything unfolds in an organized manner. I have learned in this course that it is okay to fail and struggle with concepts. Through failing, it has demonstrated what you need to work on. I also believe that struggling teaches you to persevere and push through hard times. This teaches resilience and problem-solving skills. Sometimes learning also involves taking risks. In this course, I have learned to think critically. This was a risk in itself for me, and it was difficult for me to be open to different perspectives on things. I need to attend class and not judge or reject a different idea because it was not taught to me. For example, learning about the third world exploitation was a huge eye-opener. I didn't realize how simple things could hurt other people across the world. In the future, I will always take advantage of the redo or rewrite opportunities offered to me. When I received a 76 on my multiple choice portion of a recent test, I knew that was not up to my standards. I decided to take the time to learn from my mistakes and understand important concepts that I overlooked. Unfortunately, I didn't understand who Gandhi was, and given the opportunity to take the rewrite was incentive to learn even more. I am happy to report that I received a 96 on the rewrite exam. If I could go back and take grade 10 again, I would definitely pay more attention to the examples discussed in class. It is important to understand concepts, but even more important to apply them to the real world. I would also ask more questions in class. If I did not understand a concept or idea, I should have asked immediately instead of waiting until another time. Often the learning moment has passed and the value is lost. Overall, I think my Social 10-1 career was very successful in terms of learning. I cannot wait till next year.